The haunted church with a ghost. The old St. Agnes Church stood at the edge of town, a looming silhouette against the darkened sky. Built in the late 1800s, it was once a place of solace and community. However, over the years, the church had fallen into disrepair, abandoned and forgotten. Locals whispered about eerie lights flickering in the stained glass windows at night and the faint sound of an organ playing when no one was inside. Despite its dilapidated state, the church maintained an aura of grandeur with its towering spire and intricate Gothic architecture. Legend had it that the church was haunted by the ghost of Father O'Malley, a priest who had mysteriously vanished one stormy night. Parishioners recalled his kind demeanor and dedication to the church, but something had changed in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. He became reclusive, often seen muttering to himself as if in conversation with an unseen presence. The townsfolk believed that he had been driven mad by a malevolent spirit that now kept him trapped within the church's walls. Those brave enough to approach the church at night reported hearing whispered prayers and footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Encounter with the supernatural one evening. A group of curious teenagers decided to explore the haunted church. Armed with flashlights and a sense of adventure, they made their way through the overgrown path leading to the entrance. As they pushed open the heavy wooden doors, a chill swept through them, and the musty scent of decay filled the air. The interior of the church was a stark contrast to its exterior. Pews were overturned, cobwebs draped the altar, and dust motes danced in the beams of their flashlights. Despite the obvious signs of abandonment, an eerie sense of presence permeated the space. The group split up to cover more ground, each member feeling a mix of excitement and trepidation. As one of them approached the altar, they noticed a flickering light emanating from the organ pipes. Intrigued, they moved closer, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Suddenly, a figure appeared, shrouded in a tattered robe, its face hidden in shadow. The teenager froze, unable to move or scream. The ghostly figure raised its hand, pointing towards the back of the church, where the confessional booths stood. The air grew colder, and the sense of dread intensified as the figure vanished, leaving the teenager shaken and desperate to find their friends.
Agnes Church was shrouded in an eerie silence, broken only by the creaking of the old wooden floorboards as the group cautiously explored. Dust particles floated in the beams of their flashlights, creating an ethereal, almost otherworldly atmosphere. The walls, once adorned with beautiful frescoes, were now cracked and faded, bearing silent witness to the church's tragic history. As the teenagers ventured deeper, the sense of an unseen presence grew stronger, making the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. In the sacristy, they discovered a hidden compartment behind a false panel. Inside, they found an ancient, leather-bound book covered in dust and cobwebs. Its pages were yellowed with age, filled with cryptic symbols and writings. This was no ordinary book, it was a tome of exorcisms and rituals, used to combat dark forces. One entry, in particular, stood out, a detailed ritual for banishing a powerful demon, describing it as a malevolent spirit that thrived on fear and despair. The realization dawned on them that this entity was the source of Father O'Malley's torment. Unveiling Father O'Malley's secret with the journal in hand, the group gathered in the nave, where they began to read Father O'Malley's final, harrowing entries. The once diligent and kind priest had chronicled his descent into madness as he battled the dark force that had taken hold of the church. His handwriting grew more frantic and illegible with each passing day, describing the whispers that filled his mind and the shadows that danced at the edge of his vision. He wrote about the malevolent presence that seemed to grow stronger, feeding on the fear and despair of the parishioners. The most chilling entry detailed his last night. A violent storm raged outside, and the church seemed to come alive with a dark energy. Father O'Malley recounted hearing the cries of tormented souls and seeing shadowy figures moving through the church. He attempted one final exorcism, but the entity's fury was unleashed upon him. His last words were a desperate plea for anyone who found the journal to continue his fight against the darkness. The teenagers felt a chill run down their spines as they realized the gravity of their discovery. They were now part of this battle against the malevolent force. The first supernatural encounter. As they continued to read, a sudden gust of cold wind swept through the church, extinguishing their flashlights. Panic set in as they scrambled to turn them back on, but the darkness was impenetrable. Then, from the depths of the shadows, the faint sound of an organ playing echoed through the church. The melody was haunting, filled with sorrow and despair. The teenagers froze, their breaths visible in the frigid air, as a ghostly figure materialized near the organ. It was Father O'Malley, his spectral form flickering like a candle in the wind. The ghostly priest raised a trembling hand, pointing towards the confessional booths. The group hesitated, but something compelled them to follow. As they approached the booths, the air grew colder, and a sense of dread filled their hearts. One of the teenagers reached out and opened the door to the booth where they had found the journal. Inside, the temperature dropped even further, and they felt an overwhelming sense of sorrow. Suddenly, the confessional booth door slammed shut, and the faint sound of whispered prayers filled the air. The haunting vision. The teenager inside the booth felt an intense pressure on their chest, as if an unseen force was squeezing the life out of them. Their friends pounded on the door, trying to free them, but it wouldn't budge. Just as they thought they couldn't endure it any longer, the door flew open, and they stumbled out, gasping for breath. The ghost of Father O'Malley stood before them, his eyes filled with sorrow and a silent plea for help. The group realized that the priest's spirit was not their enemy but a tormented soul seeking release from the church's dark grasp. Determined to help Father O'Malley find peace, they decided to perform the ritual described in the ancient book. The clock was ticking, and they knew they had to act quickly. They gathered the necessary items: a blessed cross, holy water, and a candle. As midnight approached, they prepared for the confrontation with the malevolent entity that held the church in its thrall.
As the teenagers continued to explore the decrepit church, they felt a growing sense of urgency. Father O'Malley's journal had revealed not only the presence of a malevolent spirit, but also detailed instructions for a ritual to banish it. They knew they had to act quickly before the entity grew stronger. The group gathered the necessary items for the ritual: a blessed cross, holy water, and an ancient book of exorcisms they found in a hidden compartment behind the altar. The storm outside intensified, with thunder echoing through the empty halls and lightning illuminating the dark corners of the church. The teenagers set up the ritual space in front of the altar, arranging candles in a precise pattern as described in the journal. Each movement was deliberate and filled with a mixture of fear and determination. They could feel the eyes of the church upon them, as if the building itself was watching their every move. The air grew colder, and the feeling of being watched became almost unbearable. As they lit the final candle, a chilling wind swept through the church, extinguishing some of the flames and causing the shadows to dance wildly on the walls. Suddenly, a low, guttural growl echoed through the church, sending shivers down their spines. The air grew even colder, and a thick fog began to seep from the corners of the room, slowly creeping towards the altar. The teenagers exchanged fearful glances, but steeled themselves for what was to come. They began to recite the incantations from the ancient book, their voices trembling but growing stronger with each word. As the incantation echoed through the church, the fog coalesced into a dark, swirling mass. Within it, the shadowy figure of the malevolent spirit began to take shape. Its eyes glowed with an unholy light, and a sinister smile twisted its ethereal face. The entity's presence was overwhelming, filling the church with a palpable sense of dread. The teenagers could feel their resolve wavering, but they knew they had to continue. The entity lashed out, causing the candles to flicker and the ground to tremble. It let out a bone-chilling scream that seemed to pierce the very fabric of reality. One of the teenagers, Sarah, stepped forward, holding the blessed cross high. "In the name of all that is holy, we command you to leave this place," she shouted, her voice firm and unwavering. The entity recoiled, its form flickering and distorting as if struggling against an invisible force. The group continued the incantation, their voices now a unified chorus of determination. Holy water was sprinkled on the ground, sizzling and evaporating upon contact with the dark fog. The entity's form grew more unstable, its sinister grin replaced by an expression of rage and desperation. It lashed out again, knocking over a few candles and sending the book flying from their hands. With a final, desperate shriek, the entity surged towards the group, its form now barely holding together. The air crackled with energy as the entity collided with the barrier formed by the Blessed Cross and the holy water. There was a blinding flash of light, and a powerful gust of wind swept through the church, extinguishing all the candles and plunging the room into darkness. When the light faded and their vision cleared, the teenagers found themselves standing in a silent, empty church. The oppressive weight that had filled the air was gone, replaced by a peaceful stillness. Father O'Alley's ghostly figure stood before them, a gentle smile on his face. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice echoing softly in the quiet. "You have freed this place and allowed me to find peace." With those final words, Father O'Alley's spirit faded into the light, leaving the group standing in the now serene church. The storm outside began to dissipate, and the first rays of dawn broke through the shattered stained glass windows. The teenagers looked at each other, relief and exhaustion evident on their faces. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. As they left the church, they knew that they would never forget this night. The haunting presence that had plagued St. Agnes Church was gone, and Father O'Alley's spirit was finally at rest. They had faced their fears and conquered the darkness, forever changing their lives. Determined not to let fear take over, the teenagers retrieved the book and resumed the ritual. Each word seemed to sap the entity's strength, causing it to wail in agony. Father O'Alley's ghostly figure appeared beside them, his once tormented visage now serene and filled with gratitude. He joined in the incantation, his voice blending with theirs in a harmonious chant.